In the spring of 1206, a Kurultai was held on the Onon River, where a gathering of Mongolia's tribes proclaimed Temujin as emperor of the new Mongol nation, the Yekka Mongol Ulus, which we know as the Mongol Empire. At over 40 years old, Temujin would finally take the title history would know him better as Chinggis Khan, more commonly mangled into English as Genghis Khan. The meaning and importance of this goddamn chickens, we've already gone over. From here on, I will refer to him basically solely as Chinggis. This Kurultai would see some important shifts in Mongol society. For one thing, the decimal system implemented before the campaign against Taiyan Khan was now spread across the entirety of the Mongol nation. All of tribal society was now being devoted to the Mongol military machine, and there was now a general conscription in place for all males ages 15 to 70, dependent on ethnicity likely. All were now liable for military service. Chinggis had a few aims at this Kurultai to cement his power. As noted by Paul Ratchnevsky, he aimed to reduce and break the power of chieftains and tribal ties, which he would do through this expansion of the decimal system, breaking up tribes, except for those who had proven their loyalty to him, such as the Oirat and the Ongut. He would create a core unit loyal solely to him and the position of the Khan. This would be the Day Guards, the Night Guards, the Quiver Bearers, the Keshik, a military corps responsible solely to him. And importantly, he would remember to reward those followers who had shown their loyalty to him. The Secret History of the Mongols spends 21 paragraphs listing these followers and Chinggis's rewards for them. Many of these were humble herdsmen such as Badai and Kishlik, who had warned Temujin of the trap Togrul Khan was setting for him, or Sorkhan Shira, who so many years ago had provided Temujin with security when he had been captured by the Tachiud. This meritocracy was an important part of the Mongol military. Ability and loyalty proved more important than birth. These humble herdsmen were now to command thousands of men, some even more than what would be commanded by Chinggis's own brothers. We have a rough idea of the size of the Mongol force at this time. We're told that 95 Minghans, groups of 1,000, were present, so 95,000 soldiers. Likely not exactly, as most of these Minghans would not be full strength. From the recently conquered Neman, particularly their chancellor Tata Tonga, the Mongols would gain the Uyghur writing system. Prior to this, the Mongols had been entirely illiterate. Now, an actual administration could be enacted, strengthening the apparatus of Chinggis's control. As well, he would initiate what is known as the Great Yassa, laws redefining and strengthening Mongol society. The adoption of wives, for instance, which had caused Chinggis such misery in his youth, was now forbidden. Adultery, as the Mongols defined it, and robbery were punishable by death, as was washing dirty things or urinating in moving water, or putting a knife into a fire, as these were believed to offend the spirits within them. The Yassa has some controversy around it, as there is no extant version of it surviving today. Only excerpts from sources as far as Egypt, written 100 years after Chinggis's death. So, we'll get into that in its own thing. Anyways, Chinggis Khan was building a state. But why? Was this always his intent? Chinggis was not an innovator as much as he was a supreme adapter and organizer. He was always able to see a good idea various groups used and mold it to make the absolute most out of it. I believe that the idea of an empire had been a fairly recent one for him, perhaps the very late 1190s or early 1200s. Due to his various defeats and difficulties over his career, and seeing the weaknesses of Khans like Togrul or the Kamag Mongol Khans, as he gained powers and a following, he sought out to ensure that he would have a strong position, one that he could pass on to his children reliably, so that they would not suffer as he had. He had always seen how tribal disunity meant that upon the defeat of their leader, or as soon as the going got tough, that the tribes would abandon whatever Khan or Bagatur they had rallied around. Chinggis wanted something that he could rely on even through defeat or his potential death, something to prevent the tribal infighting that had made so much of his life a battle for survival. This entailed weakening tribal bonds, strengthening the position of the central authority, which was aided greatly by the administrative potential provided by having a writing system. Thus, we get to the next most important component, the conquests. How does this proclamation of a Mongol nation in 1206 lead to a transcontinental Eurasian empire? Well, the people following Chinggis, as they did for all steppe military leaders, wanted loot, goods, animals, protection, women, provided by raids and conquests. An enemy to fight outside of themselves would direct their attention and efforts against that external threat rather than against themselves. This is a notion common throughout history, us versus them, a prominent example being Otto von Bismarck's unification of the German states against France in 1870. So, where would Chinggis find this external foe who would provide ample loot and a target big enough to direct the considerable energies of his nation against? The few remaining tribes on the steppe who would fall to them, such as the Merkit of Toktoabeki and Boyuk Khan's Naiman, would not provide enough of a challenge for such a task. No. The answer, my friends, would be found south, across the Gobi Desert, China. Chinggis Khan would prepare for the invasion of China almost immediately, and none would stand in his way.